Concierges, coaches, copilots, contractors, canvases, craniums, and colleagues. There you have it, the 7 C's of AI product categories. Really started onto this based on a TikTok from a TikTok creator named Vanessa who focuses on go to market, and I'll credit in the comments. And that really got me thinking from one of her recent videos on AI and product category, and really onto the thought that almost every um, AI product to date is in some brand new product category. And so it also kind of brought me around to a couple of other things. I think one is agentic and trying to achieve a sharper definition of the word agentic for agentic AI, because that's certainly a buzzword definition that means 20 million things to 20 million people. It also made me think about the challenge that I've talked about before of it's now easier than ever to go and build software applications, and it's also seemingly simultaneously harder to distribute them. And I think part of the challenge around that distribution is that we don't really have solid theories of product category, that we can use a lexicon of product category to talk about AI experiences to users. To the extent that we're always talking about an AI hype or bubble or bust curve, it tends to tell me that um, we don't really have a good vocabulary for telling users what kind of experience to expect when we say the words AI. And people's thoughts immediately zoom to kind of like the most maximal version of AGI you could imagine whenever you say the word AI. And then we're delivering experiences that are almost certain to disappoint when you bump it up against that mental definition. So it's my hope that by throwing out this typology of 7 C's of AI product category, that we can start to get a little bit sharper in how we describe the capabilities of and expectations of our AI experiences, and that will lead to greater user satisfaction, and it will lead to greater ease in go to market of AI applications. So to go through those 7 C's of AI product categories, let's start with concierge. And these get increasingly more agentic. And they also tend to have a trend towards getting increasingly more asynchronous. Starting with concierge. Concierge you can think of as being kind of reactive request handlers. You give it one small task or one small question, it goes maybe partially offline or thinks for a little bit and comes back with an answer. As part of that, it's really kind of oriented for super small tasks. And it doesn't really have tons of autonomy. It's not supposed to. And it doesn't really have lots of persistence. It's not supposed to. For doing one-off task, um, it doesn't really need to kind of remember everything that you've ever asked it before. And in fact, if it remembered everything that you'd ever asked it before in all of that context, it might give worse answers for your one-off tasks and one-off questions. So I think of this concierge as being kind of this very transactional level of AI capability, and it also tends to be kind of like the easiest, not easiest, but tends to be the most obvious and most proliferate way that AI has kind of filtered into a lot of products, because it doesn't involve a lot of reimagination of product. You can go and have Microsoft Word or what have you, and throw in a kind of concierge experience 20 years ago or whatever we called this Clippy. You can imagine Microsoft Copilot now, and you don't have to reimagine much else of the product experience to have this concierge that can maybe provide the user some value. Um, it may also be the case that, like, in adding that to a product where some people are doing transactional one-off things and some people are doing more immersive project oriented things, that you might fit into missed expectations because the AI doesn't know when it's supposed to have persistence for a larger project context and when it's not supposed to. I think that maybe is leading to some missed expectations around AI for those kinds of those kinds of product experiences. The next category is coaches. I think coaches are actually were kind of a big AI product category in 2025. Folks realized that a way of going after consumers with AI, which I think has been kind of elusive to a high degree, going after consumers, was to build coaching experiences that could help the user do something better, think about something better, decide something better, or have better habits. Especially on the have better habits part, I think has been pretty big. Um, the coaches are not taking action for you. They tend to combine being synchronous and asynchronous because a coach is probably working to kind of figure out what is the next step in that user's journey for whatever the coach is trying to optimize. And so the coaches probably have aspects of being both synchronous and asynchronous that act in concert. They're pretty oriented to one kind or genre of task. And they're not taking actions or doing work per se on behalf of the user. They're working as a guidance system that can give kinds of prompts to the user. It's kind of maybe a form of reverse prompting that can kind of help lead the human user towards better outcomes. Copilots. I think copilots were another very big breakout AI product category of 2025, especially in the coding world. And I think of these as being pretty highly synchronous shared control assistants with an emphasis on using project context to read user intent in order to go and autocomplete that intent. I don't want to call it fancy autocomplete. I don't like that term, but copilots are really designed to be these kind of synchronous things that just speed up the task that a user is trying to do. And unlike the concierge model, it really does have to have a larger project context that lives at that project level. And it also has to be extremely good at kind of grokking whatever that user intent is and trying to complete it. And then it has to give the completed AI work back to the user in a form that the user can digest, grok, and approve. And you have to have that loop be really, really, really tight. You can't have too much of an error rate or even a delay at the context understanding step. You can't have too much of an error rate or delay in the user intent mapping step, and you can't have too much of a error rate or delay in what you bring back to the user. You have to have all of those really tight. And to the extent that vibe coding took off in 2025, it was because players in vibe coding figured out how to get that loop really, really tight. And the context management behind the scenes that really kind of understands the code and therefore the context of your project is a big, big, big secret as to why those systems work so well. It turns out that fulfilling user intent is easier if you have a record of everything that the user has done in a related project context to that point. Another dimension of this taxonomy, contractors. I think of these as being the asynchronous version of that Copilot's definition. And if you look in a lot of IDs and other vibe coding tools, you're starting to see that dichotomy play out in terms of features of those IDs between copilots, which is kind of like lives together with you and is working on tasks actively together with you, and where you might have several such tasks that like put together to the level of a commit, versus kind of like this dispatch-based executor where I go and give an agent a task, it goes and works on it kind of autonomously and comes back and says, hey, here it is, here's your pull request, here's your feature that you wanted. Asynchronous where the previous thing is synchronous, I think is the biggest difference between the two. And again, it has to have that loop of understand project context, understand intent, and present, execute and present the work product. That loop also has to be really, really tight. It has to be even tighter because it tends to have more scope, more autonomy, and more asynchronicity than the Copilot mode. And so there's more places where it can mess up. And so to the extent that tools like Claude Code and certain usages of Cursor and other vibe coding IDEs get this right, it's because they've even up leveled the game for user intent understanding and context understanding to get that loop really, really tight. Canvases. I think that canvases were starting to embed, canvases obviously being a previous product category that has started to extend AI capabilities into those canvases. So if you think of things like Canva and Miro and etc., those pre-existed generative AI and obviously saw a benefit in trying to extend their capabilities with AI. And canvases, canvases really around trying to fulfill I want to say a user intent per se, but trying to fulfill user imagination or creation or ideation around some project, around some thing, a larger project, often creative, that a user is trying to accomplish. Um, the often kind of featuring an infinite whiteboard, idea sandbox of some kind, and the idea is that these are designed to be kind of synchronous. Like, I go and I may move things around in Figma or Notion, and it will try to autocomplete either in text or in images or graphics. Autocomplete's not the right word, but it'll try to extrapolate creative intent, and it will try to go and accomplish various creativity completing intents as well. But mostly a focus on being synchronous, and mostly a focus on visual as opposed to text, although they often include text as well. Next category, which I playfully call craniums just to shoehorn into my hokey taxonomy here. But these are second brains, and these have been blowing up a little bit just in terms of hype. I also think of Cutline as basically being a second brain for marketing. But the idea is it's really trying, if you think of canvases as trying to extend visual creativity of a human user, I think craniums or second brains are all about extending, likewise about extending creativity of that user. But unlike canvases, it is non-visual for the most part, and it is asynchronous. The idea of a second brain in many cases is something that can be ideating as the human user would, but while that human user is working on some other task, including eating, sleeping, and other tasks of life. So, I think of canvases and craniums as being kind of closely related in terms of trying to extend project level creativity of some sort. But canvases being kind of close to the visual medium and synchronous channel, and craniums as being non-visual and asynchronous. I think that for me is the main distinction that I have for those. And then the last category, and I think this is the category that a lot of folks, when you say AI, zoom to, which is a pretty close to AGI type thing, and pretty close to as agentic as you can possibly imagine type of thing. I'm going to call them colleagues, again, to kind of shoehorn them into my hokey taxonomy here. But a lot of people, I can justify calling them colleagues and shoehorning them into my taxonomy, because when you tell people about AI, a lot of people flash to HAL from 2001, and before HAL tries to take over the ship and kill the astronauts, he talks often about his valued colleagues. So I feel like that gives me the justification to talk about these near AGI types of coworkers as colleagues. They work together with the human user synchronously or asynchronously. They can have as much agency as they need to have in order to go accomplish some task. And I wouldn't even primarily construe them as just completing tasks, because I think that's closer to the concierge idea. But they go and take some, if you think about like all the agency extending ideas in the first six categories, where second brains work offline while the human user is sleeping or doing something else. If you think about being able to work asynchronously to go execute a project, whether it's asynchronous creativity or it's asynchronous execution, etc. Um, colleague type AI tends to be able to do any of that. And it's not really trying to complete tasks, and it's not trying to auto-complete imagination. It's trying to complete user goals. And so if you thought of these dimensions of agency that each of these categories have, where a concierge is kind of cued into the immediate ask of a user, and it has no persistence and no context. It just goes and does the immediate thing it was asked in the last sentence. And you work up to um, you work up to copilots, where copilots have to have a software engineering project context and be able to kind of execute on that. The context that a colleague has to be able to glue into is higher than a project level context. It's a goal level context, and those goals can scope very, very, very high for users, which is what gets people very excited. It is also what leads to a lot of disappointment, because when you roll out AI experiences that are not in that colleague category, people are kind of thinking of, why can't this thing go and map to my goals or to my intent? Why do I have to babysit it? Um, and so I think that that's part of the reason that um, AI, AI doesn't always meet the expectations that people have of it, because we don't talk very precisely about the kind of product category that AI is in. So those are what I see as kind of seven categories for AI product experience that I think exist. And I think you can call the seventh, the colleagues category, kind of a starting to be kind of realized AI category. If you thought of kind of like some of the pro or ultra levels of some of the um, flagship foundation AI models, especially in um, research and thinking mode, you're getting something that's kind of close to that colleagues experience. I think the multimodality and asynchronicity of the colleagues category is something that isn't always found in those, and that um, we still tend to work with those foundation models in a pretty synchronous way, which is not to say that the AI model makers aren't trying to figure out ways to extend those to the asynchronous realm. But by and large, we tend to interact with them in a live synchronous way. So really trying, yeah, again, like I wanted to work through this typology of definitions that I thought was making sense to me. I don't think that this is, I think that um, I think more than anything else, it's not that I want folks to adopt this particular taxonomy with my, particularly hokey rhyming scheme, alliteration scheme, I should say. It's that I think we want to land on similar kinds of taxonomies to help us articulate more readily as we go to market, and um, as we kind of try to protect and further the AI wave of innovation, and kind of protect us from the worst aspects of AI hype. I think it's important to talk about AI experiences in an increasingly precise way. And I think it will help both AI as an industry, but I think it will also help all of us as AI entrepreneurs and workers as well. So yeah, that's what I had. That's what I had for you today. That's what was top of mind. Thank you so much for following along, and be well, everybody. Cheers.